I agree with you. How ISIS was created is definitely, imperialism. But make no mistake, the refugee crisis started before the bombing started. ISIS has a huge contribution to the refugees. Before the coalition started bombing, the refugees were moving through the regions already. The bombing that you're speaking of, were attacking Kurds, that's Turkey doing that only. I've seen the bombings firsthand. They're hitting ISIS targets, they're not hitting us, they're not hitting Kurds, they're not hitting innocent people. If you want to get mad at anyone bombing, you get mad at Turkey. Right now, they need the bombing. What's saving Kurdish lives right now is the airstrikes. Before I arrived there, the Shaheed count was a lot higher because there was no airstrikes. We'd have to take a village with just guns, handguns, AKs, door-to-door stuff. Now, villages are evacuated, we call it an airstrike, we wipe out ISIS, we go in after and clean it up. So the bombing is needed right now. But like I said, if you wanted to get mad at somebody for bombing, get mad at Turkey. They're the ones who are attacking the Kurds in the KRG, and Barzani's letting them do it. I don't agree with that at all.
Next question.
I want to thank all of you for being here today and for every speaker, including the 2 other questions that were asked. But I guess I'm also really interested in this idea of democratic confederalism that has come out of Öcalan's writings and out of different collaborations between different groups in the West and their influences with Kurdish people and Kurdish people's history. And I'm interested to know how you've seen, I guess, direct democracy occurring, and how you imagine the structures to be, and what are your thoughts on those democratic structures?
Within the YPG and the YPJ, they actually follow that command structure, that governance. Whenever we would have an issue, or even if we didn't have an issue, every day, especially the women, the men were so diligent with it, but the women were quite diligent. We would have a TACM every night, or TACMIR, which was a meeting, and we would talk about the issues of the day. If there was a problem, we would talk about the problem, and we would talk about solutions for the problem. And then if there was a punishment was warranted, we would vote. Does somebody need to be punished for this? And if the vote was yes, then we would vote on the kind of punishment. And the punishments weren't anything harsh, like, it wasn't like an execution or anything like that. But it would be things like if there was a girl in my first job who accidentally set off a grenade and injured 2 others. And her punishment was the most severe. She was ostracized for 4 days, no one was allowed to talk to her. And then she had to write a report that was sent up the command. And then there was a critique of her, and we had to gather around. I didn't participate in this part because I wasn't fully involved in it yet, but they just essentially critiqued her for what she did wrong. And in the culture there, it hits home. To me, it's just like, go ahead, critique me, I don't care. But over there, they take it personally. So it's a sufficient punishment for what she did. What I heard when I was over there is that people go to jail for 3 reasons: rape, murder, or treason. It's not like here we can go to jail for, like, a gram of weed or, something stupid like that. So they like to solve the problems on a communal basis. They'll get together as a community and they'll say, this is the problem. They'll discuss why it's a problem and how it hurts people, how can they fix it, and then they'll decide if the punishment is warranted. And I actually like the way it works there. It works very quickly and efficiently. And people who are elected to be in charge, they're not really in charge. Their job is to manage the decisions made at the bottom. So the people at the bottom make the decision, the person at the top, it's his job to make sure that decision comes through. Unlike here, where we elect people to be the top, and then they make the decisions for us, and if we don't like it, well, too bad, they're gonna, start labeling us as terrorists.
And there's always a girl and a guy in charge together.
Yeah.
It's never just a guy or just a girl.
The guys are not allowed to make decisions for the women.
Thank you. So before we go to the next question, before everyone leaves, if anyone wants to know about the Kurdish House events, because Kurdish House is running a lot of events around the Kurdish issues, so you can add Kurdish House on Facebook. It is Kurdish Space House.
Hello. First, I'd like to thank everyone for this wonderful talk. It's definitely a first, and bringing Kurdish women to the front and talking about what Kurdish women do at the front lines is incredibly important, not just for the Kurds, but for women in general. in general across the globe to know that we can take up arms, that we can actually defend ourselves, that we can change this world. Women need to know this, and to see Kurdish women in the front lines will change the world for women everywhere. But that aside, Hanna, thank you for everything that you've shown us today and discussed. Unfortunately, you didn't share very much about yourself. If you could tell us what was your background, where did you get your military training, if it was Canadian, and if it is Canadian, as a Canadian soldier, if that's your background, how does you partaking in Kurdish struggles affect your career in Canada? And if an American soldier goes to join the Kurdish forces, how would that affect them participating in any future military activity within the US, or if it becomes problematic for you, or if you become a face that Canada will watch out for as a potential terrorist or anything along those lines?
Good question. Most of the fighters over there who are military, none of them are current military unless they're part of the coalition. I've never been in the military. I was never Canadian military. My brother's in the Canadian military. I have friends in the Canadian military. I have contacts with Canadian intelligence, but I don't have any military background. The Kurds trained me, sort of. They gave me about 4 hours of training. And then they said that, I was shooting. I have experience with guns, and they saw that I could shoot straight. So they're like, okay, you're good enough. But yeah, most of the people there, they're not current military. A lot of them are ex-military who never had a deployment. So they want to have their deployment. So they go there to fight ISIS. A lot of them don't like ISIS. What I found is that the demographics are mostly Americans, followed by Brits, Germans, and then it just kind of blends in with everybody else there. The Americans and the Brits, they're there to kill. They just want to kill, right? They want to get into combat, they want to kill ISIS. The Germans, every single German I met there was there for the revolution. They had either joined officially, or they were there just as, volunteers, but they were there for the revolution. Everyone else was like me, it was a bit of a mix, to kill, to help, to get the life experience, things like that. In my case, I was there, I would tell people when I was going that I'm not going there to kill anyone, I'm going there to help people. That was my first goal. My second goal was to try and document as much of it as I could. Like Nissy said earlier, we spent about almost a day going through footage, trying to find appropriate footage. There's stuff that we didn't feel comfortable showing that's just too graphic. But that's essentially the reason why I went there was to help. I saw what they were doing, I didn't like ISIS. I didn't like the government's taking this passive role. I didn't like them, colluding. ISIS was colluding with Turkey. I didn't like any of that stuff. And I thought, well, if the governments aren't going to do anything about it, then people like me have to do something about it. Clearly our governments are failing. And it's unfortunate that normal, everyday citizens have to go and do this, to help. Our governments aren't listening anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hello. I am more interested at this point about how you look at the upcoming election in Turkey. Because obviously Erdogan is being very aggressive because he's losing power.
I think he's trying to scare Turks into thinking that the Kurds are the bad guys.
Exactly, and HDP has been a big part of him losing the power, actually. So 1st November is the new election, avoiding the previous one, but yeah. How do you see it happening? What do you think? Come on.
It's a very complex question. Well, we've seen that he's been prompting Kurdish civilians to, it's not just the Turkish police anymore, he's just been prompting Kurdish civilians to take up arms, and they've been, like I said, 178 HDP offices were attacked. So he's inciting that fear amongst the Turkish civilians, and I think that's his way of trying to get reelected. I hope that he doesn't, but you never know.
Thank you. Next question, please.
I just kind of want to ask, in your opinion, what do you think will happen and like in the near future for that region? And what do you think is the best case scenario?
Every time that there's been hope for an independent Kurdistan, this was last year actually, right before what happened in Shangal, and there was all this talk about declaring independence. And then 2 weeks later, the ISIS went into Shingal, and we saw devastating results with that. So as a Kurd, we're hopeful, but we know what's lurking around the corner. We have 4 nations that we're dealing with, and the ideal situation would be to have our independence, to have our own in a democratic nation. That would be ideal, but we just know every time that we've been hopeful, there's been something around the corner for us waiting.
The success of Kurdistan depends on the international community too. They have to be recognized in the UN, and all the governing bodies have to sit and say, okay, this is Kurdistan now.
Yeah, right now.
They have to stop interfering with Kurdistan, with the rule of Kurdistan.
And yeah, and right now Turkey is an ally, a NATO ally, and until that changes, I don't think that they're going to side with the Kurds. They are siding with the Kurds. It's all geopolitical, so if you're a Kurd from the occupied Iraq region, you're an ally, but if you're a Kurd from the occupied Turkish area, you're a terrorist. So it all depends on which Kurd you're, what type of Kurd you are and where you're from.
And predominantly, they just want to get along with each other also. You know, they're very much like we are here. All my information about them has been what had been taught to me from Western media. And you know, unfortunately, the Middle East is portrayed as a bunch of angry people. But they're not like that at all. They get along with each other. They just want to get along with each other.
I had a question for Hanna. You mentioned that you invited some guy to cuddle or something on the rooftop at one point. I was just wondering, are there rules when men and women serve alongside each other about romance, and like are they not allowed? Like,
yeah, it's like any army, like the Canadian Army, no fraternizing. That's really about it. People fall in love, it happens. You know, it's human nature. So, but generally, it's not an issue. Most of the people who join, they're committed to the cause. So even in their mind, they don't have time for it. That was an issue with some of the Western fighters that would go there. It's not like Captain America, he was always trying to hit on the girls. And I kept telling him, it might be a joke to you, but to them to take it seriously, you can get them in trouble, so just don't do it. You know, but yeah, it's, you know, the guys and girls generally will sleep in separate rooms. On that night, when I was on the roof, because I was just with Westerners, we're used to, you know, we can sleep in the same room, it doesn't mean we're going to have sex, so it was no big deal for us to share the roof with each other.
So you generally not notice any like tensions or problems? Like...
No, the gender equality there is on such a level beyond what we have here that a lot of times when there's an effort to bring women into parity with men, it seems just like that, an effort. And sometimes you can even sense resentment. Over there, it's just so normal that it's normal, it just feels normal. I was really surprised by how well it was there. And I was more surprised by how used I had become to it, because when I came back, the first couple of weeks back, I had no patience for men. I went to go buy a motorbike, and I called the guy on Craigslist, and I asked him what is a motorbike, and he's like, yeah, it's a girl's bike. I'm like, what the fuck is a girl's bike? Right? So and I just told him, I hung up, and then I went to go buy a helmet, and the guy's like, oh, we have pink ones over here. I'm like, what the hell says pink about me? It's like, just things like that. I had no patience for it, right? So, and that's, because we live in the West, we're so used to, you know, some sexism on a daily basis. We built up a wall of defense against it. When I went there, I was able to put that down, and in some cases, I was actually the aggressive one towards the men. You know, because I was so used to having to be that way here, that the men would be like scared of me. You know, there was times I'd sit next to one, and they'd be like move their chair away because they didn't know what was going to go happen. Right? So I was like, oh, you're okay. So it was a nice break from the West. Actually, I really miss the parity and the equality. They're way ahead of us in gender equality. Way ahead of us. We have a lot to learn from them. I did some modeling about 10 years ago, and it was totally blown out of proportion. I did an interview with the Daily Mail, and they were asking me what kind of jobs I'd had before. And I listed a bunch of them, and they just seemed to grab onto the model thing and make that the key thing. I did a little bit of modeling. I didn't make a living at it. They're not the kind of photos I'd want to show anymore anyways. But that's the extent of modeling. I've done other things. I was a private investigator for 8 years, and no one's mentioned that in the media. But like I said, I was never military, and those when I say that those guys are undercover, it's just to protect their identities and their families' identities back home. They're not undercover like, you know, military or...
Yeah, they're worried about ISIS.
Yeah.
Because ISIS is very common in Europe.
Yeah, so they're not like intelligence agencies or anything like that. But there were, like I said, there were special forces guys from various governments there, and they were there to coordinate the airstrikes. So there were, like, you know, undercover people there, but they were, you know, put there by coalition governments. So does that answer your question? Is that good?
So again, I would like to thank all of you.
Wait, I want to just one more. I want to hear.
I'm sorry, I don't want to press on it, but the gentleman repeated what I was asking. I think what we were both driving at is that who were you sponsored by, or did you fund your own trip yourself?
Oh yeah, I paid for everything myself. Oh, I had one friend who gave me some money, but yeah, everything was myself.
Okay. Does any political party or any Western organization take interest?
I'm not politically motivated. I was interviewed for the Georgia Strait, and he turned that interview into a whole political thing. Like when I read it, I was just like, I didn't take shots at anyone. So no, I don't have any political things. I sold everything I owned. I only kept what would fit on a motorbike because I had this dream that I'd come back and ride down to California, and that's not going to happen now. So no, I had a friend who gave me some money. He thought I was crazy, but he's like, okay, we'll give you some money anyways. And that's it. I have no affiliation with anything.
And just to add on to that, Hanna is planning a trip back to Rojava, and she was funding herself. And there is a GoFundMe slash, what is it, Hanna Bohman?
Hanna in Rojava.
Hanna in Rojava. So if anybody would like to fund her trip back.
Essentially, I'm just trying to get some new, my camera was destroyed when I was there, and I'm just trying to get some new camera equipment so I can do more photos and take more interviews and stuff like that.